Eden Koz here with Just Be, and we are about to take a spiritual boom. We are at an unprecedented time in human history where we are transitioning from 3D to 5D within the great spiritual awakening. This video and audio podcast is the place for you to find your truth beyond politics, your sovereignty, your voice. Let's kick up your vibration now. By the way, each episode ends with the Just Be practice to do just that. And as we begin the show, just to know a little bit more about me, I'm a soul realignment specialist, meditation master, and dimensional healer. Learn more, and there's merch also at EdenJustBe.com. Let's get this party started. To get the energy going. Now we'll begin. Eden, Just Be, Spiritual Boom. In association with the Grassroots Warrior Network on Rumble, who they are great folks, and they work so hard. So please check them out as well. Barbara With, hi.
Good morning, Eden. So nice to be here.
Welcome to the show. And it's going to be a great one, which I think it always is. You're in Wisconsin, is that correct?
I am.
That's so neat because I haven't had anyone on the show from Wisconsin before.
Or lives in Lake Superior.
Ooh, Lake Superior. Is that where you grew up?
No, I grew up in Minneapolis, but I live on an island in northern Wisconsin in Lake Superior. Very special place.
Wow, that sounds great. Okay, let me sit with that for a second. Okay, Barbara knows I'm going to chat a little bit and then read her bio. So if you're new to the show, welcome. And first, I want to bring up my Talk to the Stars t-shirt. I just love it. So there's lots of merchandise on my website. What is my website? EdenJustBe.com. And the merch area, there are like 32 designs of just great awakening, beautiful stuff. So go there. I love this shirt because it's soft and it feels really good. And I'm probably going to wear my Starseed shirt pretty consistently from this point on. Okay. I want to let folks know, oh my gosh, I've been doing this podcast, Barbara, since January 2022. So it's been almost like 2 years and 8 months. And every week I check in on myself to go, should I still be doing this? Because I have work that I do as well. And this is just, I feel like this is an extension of it. Okay. All right. At episode 36, it was all audio and it was mostly just me. And then I started adding guests. So that's when it became audio and visual. It had gotten to the point where, I was coming on and all of this is about raising consciousness. And it just I felt like I was exposing a lot of stuff and it just did not start feeling fun. So when guests started coming on, it totally elevated the show. And it wasn't just me, it was both of us talking about what's going on. So it's been very riveting. Okay. And I wanted to bring this up because I feel this is very unique about this podcast as well. So every episode ends with what I call a Just Be practice. So Barbara today is going to be doing some sort of channeling. And the practice the intention of it is to raise consciousness. And what people bring to the show, it is just dramatic. So I think one of the reasons that Spirit keeps telling me to do this every week is because I am different every week. These Just Be practices for me, I get done with the show and I'm like, oh, I feel different. All right. So if you go back and watch the shows, if you don't want to watch the whole show, that's okay. If you just want to go to the practice at the end, I mean, there's some really good stuff. Okay. Last thing I want to say before we get straight to Barbara is I would love for you guys to subscribe to my YouTube channel. They have been shushing me a little bit. So it's just so fun when people subscribe just to help it be seen. And, I'm also on BitChute and Rumble as well. Yet my gut says just to keep YouTube for a while. So I will stay there. Okay. I think that's it. Okay, Barbara, let me read your bio. Okay. And y'all know I'm the editor, producer of all this as well. So sometimes I look at the clock. So please excuse me for that because I have to be aware of everything. Barbara With, an international peace activist, award-winning author, publisher, psychic channel, composer and performer, workshop facilitator, and inspirational speaker. Love that. She is the co-founder of Conflict Revolution, a revolutionary way to resolve conflicts of the psyche based on her work channeling Albert Einstein. Barbara teaches and trains conflict revolution in the classroom and on Zoom, and lectures on her Einstein's unified field theory, maps of human consciousness, and the science of compassion. Okay, you've been doing this for a while, haven't you?
I have.
For how long?
I started channeling in 1987.
Okay, good
And
stuff.
I started doing groups in 1993.
Mm-hmm.
And that is really what has led me here to you today.
Yes. All right. I want to start out with I was watching a show of yours, and it was so funny that right when I got to this part, I couldn't find it again. But this is what I want to start out. You were doing some investigating. I think you had done some investigative journalist work, or that's just kind of who you are in terms of censorship. So when I saw that too, that really let me know you know about the Great Awakening and all facets of that. So, how did that start becoming clear to you that there's this great evolution that's going on, and that there's so much good and bad to all of it, and that's what we're supposed to, excuse me, we're supposed to see. How did you come to that knowledge? Whew, it's a loaded question.
It is a loaded question, and I don't want to load it up anymore. But I think it in its inception, it started back when I started doing groups.
Okay.
But where it really came to fruition was in these past 4 years of what we've been through. And I started to put together the idea that what Einstein and the angels and the psychic sorority were learning and teaching and creating in conflict revolution is the answer to what my investigative journalism has been doing about the influence of propaganda on our minds and spirits and souls.
Yes.
And as I went through my own dealing with that time period, I started to put those pieces together and realized my whole career or life or mission of teaching this has been to, first of all, you said it's about resolving the conflicts of the psyche. And it's basically about the propaganda in our heads that constantly tell us we're not good enough, we're not smart enough, we can't do this. We call them voices of culture. And then I started to see that in these past 4 years on a bigger level of how, what I'm seeing outside myself is this extension and this explosion of really what's been happening inside human nature for a long time.
Nice. And I do want to go into that more because I watched one show too when you're talking about it starts with us. And I really enjoyed, well, let's go ahead and go into that for a moment. I really enjoyed how you talk about emotions because I tell my clients too, like emotions are a gift from God. There's nothing negative about them. And we, to see them, to be with them. And the way you described it too was so beautiful. Can you talk about that?
Sure.
It's a big question too.
No, yeah, it is. But in our work with conflict revolution, we work with what we call the three human dimensions, and in emotion, intuition, and intellect. And we put them in location. So intellect is in your head, intuition is in your heart, emotions are in your solar plexus. And what emotions are in reality, according to Einstein, this is the sort of the primordial soup of creation. It is the fuel that underlies all of these physical objects that we're experiencing, because we can't experience those physical objects without our interaction with consciousness and the way that we project and perceive the world in the lens. And so emotion, with a capital E, becomes the whole gamut of creation. And when we are told, no, no, these are bad emotions. No, you stray away from those emotions. In fact, I had wrote this paper called Why the Secret Doesn't Work and How to Fix It, because everyone's always saying, no, don't be in those low level emotions. And what we do is we want to unify them all. We want to be able to feel and really breathe all of them through our system, through our body, without allowing them to fuel the thoughts that then project on other people, that give that propaganda in our heads, because that's what brings it to life.
Beautiful way of describing it. And I wrote down emotion is the gamut of creation. I think that's so excellent. Okay, I'm going to jump around a little bit because I also thought this was so interesting. All right, when you started channeling, your friend's mother, who was a mentor to you in high school, was a channel. I mean, when I heard that first, I'm like, what are the chances that that happened? Okay, tell me more about that. That's really interesting.
Well, when I was in high school, and this was in the late 60s, so
Yeah.
we didn't even have recording devices to take with us to the readings. But I was in this group of people. We were very, very creative people, and we never drank and we never did drugs, but we'd get together on Saturday nights and we'd make candles and we'd make movies. And then at the end of the night, I'd sit down and play because I was a musician. I had written many, many songs by that time. And one of those friends, Mike, said to me one day, you got to come and see what my mom does. So it wasn't like I was looking for psychic advice. It was
Right.
just like, well, what does your mom do? He's like, I can't explain it. You need to come see it. So I went to his mom's house with my friend Gail to take notes, and she was this beautiful, sweet, kind woman, and she had this big picture of Jesus, and she lit a candle and she closed her eyes and she started to speak. And she read my mind, even using words that I had been thinking. She was addressing issues I was having at the time with my mother at that time. And her reading was really about, it was more about self-loving, learning how to self-love, than it was about a prediction. Oh, well, you're going to do this and you're going to
Yeah.
do that. It was very much about trying to help me heal from the pretty traumatic childhood that I had. And I didn't actually, I think my first reading was in 1969 or 70. And so I didn't really start channeling until 1987. And through that time, I saw her on a regular basis and really learned just a lot about the art of channeling. She never remembered anything, and she described herself as an antenna. She
Mm-hmm.
wasn't channeling anybody. She was just an antenna picking up the
Mm-hmm.
higher power to give to me.
So when you first were exposed to that through Mike, were you just like, because at that time, and since even in the past couple 5 years, like star seeds and some of these words that were like I've been told many times, oh, you might work for the devil, you lead a cult. Like so much of what we do is considered not so great. So I'm assuming at that time, especially growing up, that who like was this secretive in terms of her doing that? Like, were you shocked? What did you feel?
I wasn't shocked. I think because I had started writing music
Mm.
at such a young age, I had this process where I would go, I said I'd go into outer space and I'd listen to
Wow.
and pull in the music. It's not like I sat down and thought about it. And when she described how she channeled, that's how I felt when I wrote music. So I was very
Oh,
comfortable with
wow.
that. Now
Okay.
she studied Edgar Cayce. And if anybody remembers Edgar Cayce,
Mhm.
he was very much a Christian, but he channeled mostly, I think, medical stuff. He helped many, 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 many people overcome illnesses with his channeling.
Mhm.
So, but in terms of was it secretive? Uh, to a point,
Mhm.
we had to sort of be careful who we said this to, unless we wanted to get accused of being, the tools of the devil, oftentimes.
Right.
But certainly in this day and age, that still goes on, but it's so much more open.
Yes, it is definitely. All right. So talk about when you first started. and knowing that you had, this is so awesome too, knowing that in music, that it was essentially being channeled through you. All right, tell us about the process and how it came to evolve.
It came about because I was typing a letter to a friend of mine. I was very angry and judgmental. And suddenly my hands started typing these beautiful words about, when you make judgments, you close down your sight like a lens, and all you see is a small portion of the whole. And so, knowing what it was after years with Eunice, I went with it. But I was still sort of shocked that it was happening. And I said, "Who are you?" And the answer was sound.
Nice.
And at that time, that was fine with me.
Mhm.
Like, I can live with that. I've been working with sound for a very long time. And so I finished out that, and I still have these papers. I
Wow.
finished out that channeling and I started to write. So people would come over and they'd sit next to me and then I'd write, 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 write. And after about a year, I thought, Eunice spoke. So try it sometime. Figure out how to do it. And I was
Okay.
at
And
this,
Eunice was Mike's mother.
yes, Mike's
Okay.
mother,
Thank you.
Eunice McCoy. And I was at a party and I just said, "Hey, you guys, I want to try this experiment." And there was one guy who was super critical, like kind of sarcastic. And I said, "You know what? You don't have to believe it,
Yeah.
but if you could just not say all that sarcastic stuff, because this is an experiment. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what I'm going to say." And so I closed my eyes and I felt this sort of, I called it a rush of wind almost, like came up from my feet, kind of up through me. And I started to speak. And we didn't record the first time, but when I got done, people were crying. And the guy who was the sarcastic asked the most interesting questions about the nature of reality in the universe.
Wow.
And that was it. But I think there's such a difference between when you're writing something and then when it comes into voice. It brings it more power and more gravity and more ownership. Like, now I'm really saying this, so I have to be behind it. But that's how that started.
Okay. And did you say were you conscious when it was
Yes.
happening? Okay. So you it's like okay, like letting go yet being in it at the same time.
Yes.
Was that initially scary for you, or since they said they were sound, it was like, okay, I can, this resonates with me.
Yes.
So it just came.
I wasn't afraid at all. And I honestly was not thinking in any way, shape, or form about some marauding demons who could take over my soul. I just didn't have that kind of consciousness.
Well, that's really great. Well, that leads me to this question. Has anything like that ever happened?
No.
Good. Well, and part of it too, and you tell me what you think about this too. Like if that is not in your consciousness, or like we are at this pivotal point, I also believe that we have the power, especially right now, to go, none of that is going to be in my consciousness anymore. I'm not going to have fear over that, even though part of this time is to really clearly see the polarity of good and bad and to make a choice of what we're going to experience, who we're going to be with. And I feel we are, especially right now, the energy is just like, yes, if high vibration, connecting with other high vibration people, wow, it is more doable than it has ever been before. What would you say to that?
Oh, absolutely. And having gone through decades of
Yeah.
this change, it is clear that here in 2024 that the evolution of consciousness is rapidly increasing. And when I started in 93 doing the groups, um, there was information and knowledge that was being given to us. I had a group, we called ourselves the psychic sorority when we're still the psychic sorority, but we organized these groups and I would channel and we'd record and then we'd transcribe. And the information at that time, if you would have talked to
Ah,
somebody in 1994 about, okay, so when you do this inner work, you're contributing to global peace, they would have looked at you, and they often did, like you were nuts. And then who really, in the 90s, probably some of your listeners weren't even born in the 90s, but
Mm-hmm.
it was a pretty peaceful time, a pretty peaceful, prosperous time, at least in the United States of America. And people they weren't really super concerned about world peace. It was a nice idea. Yeah, the beauty queen contests, I want world peace. But nobody seems to, today,
Yeah.
I can tell you everybody is really concerned.
Oh, well, yes, because there's so much chaos in the world, which is supposed to be, and the point of it is to have you wake up, to desire change, for you to look inside of yourself. Can we talk about this for just a second? Because I, eh, you individually are like your own little earth, your own little world. And as you look internally and look at what I call the demons, the shadow side, whatever you want to call it, and the beauty within you, and you're willing to confront that, you change the world. All right, tell me your words on that. You've talked about it a little bit, but let's continue.
Well, to kind of jump ahead to the
Yes.
most complicated, when I finally started to talk to Einstein, and that's a whole nother story we can talk about, but what he did was he delivered to me a unified field theory from afterlife, that something he didn't do in real life. And in that theory, he draws this map of human consciousness and the three human dimensions and
Mhm.
how matter is manifest and how we have this human experience. And in that, he said, the source, the center of everything, is in the center of the planet. And it operates like a black hole. And from that he calls it a compilation of consciousness that we each have, there runs a gravitational wave from the center of the planet up to the surface of the planet, where when it bursts through, it creates what we call the lens of our physical experience. Here's our bodies, everything's separate. It starts out, we're all one, flows up that wave, and it starts to separate and pull. And then our bodies are projecting and perceiving that wave. So we are absolutely essential to have that human experience of the physical world. We're not separate from it. And so these three human dimensions are located between the source and the lens. So they're in this non-physical part moving through the earth. And when they are not in alignment, when there is conflict between these three human dimensions, it perfectly manifests in the lens, because that's how the system works. It's just a perfect system of projection of this wave going in. So when we go in and do our work and find those shadow sides and make conscious decisions to change our decisions and bring this alignment to compassion and bring that peace in, then that naturally manifests in our world around us as well, in a way that we can't go at right in that conflict. Like you can be having a conflict with somebody, and you can pull them aside and make them sit down, and you can talk nicely, and you can talk about your issues, and you can do this and that. But when you do it this way, and you change yourself, that naturally impacts your relationships to everything, but to people. And people change. They either rise to the occasion, or they kind of disappear when we find that peace. So it's a bigger, broader, more complex system than I can explain right here. But just know that we are a part of the earth. Quite literally, we are that wave. So we have a profound impact on what we can do to the bigger planet.
I have two questions from that. Okay, first, I think you talked about intuition being in the heart, which and emotions being in the gut. Correct me if I'm
Mhm.
incorrect on this. And we also think about gut instincts being here. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Oh, yeah. Emotion informs us. Emotion is the first step out of the source. And for us, compassion with the capital C is the fifth fundamental force of the universe. So it's what's impelling all of this creation.
Ooh.
And one of the things that compassion does is that it imbues us with this understanding that we're all one. And it's going to move us to make what we call the next most advantageous step for the good of the whole. That's what we call intuition. So emotion comes up on this part of the wave and it's informing us. And if there's anger or depression or sadness or happiness or whatever, it's informing us. And as it moves up that wave and it comes into that heart, that's when intuition is born and the voice of compassion arises to inform us what is that next step for us to take that's going to be for the good of the whole system. Whether it's this system, it starts with your system. It's not about trying to figure out what's good for you and you and you and you and you. I have to figure all this out. It's like, what in this moment is my intuition telling me is the next most advantageous step for the good of this whole system? And, intuition works on subconscious levels. Like there's this beat, heart, beat, heart. It's impelling the heart to beat. We don't hear that, while we're in our consciousness, but it's doing that too. So it's telling you, rest, be quiet, speak up. And when we don't feel the emotion, we cut off the intuition as well.
It's a really good way of saying it too. Okay, say that again. When we cut off the emotion,
we cut off intuition.
We cut off intuition.
Now, the glitch, just let me tell you, is when it gets to the intellect.
Yeah.
Because the intellect is where the functioning, our free will is functioning. And when you move your arm to grab the steering wheel to turn left, that functioning takes place from the intellect, from this part of the wave. You don't impel your hand to turn left from your intuition. Your intuition informs you to turn left, but your intellect can turn right. And how many times, this is the easy one, how many times have our intuition said rest? And our intellect says, I can't rest. I've got a million things to do. And off we go, doing a million things. And then we get sick and then we have conflicts. So it's really this whole system of conflict resolution parboils it down to this very, very microscopic level where we do have control. Well, we don't always control it, but this is our domain. This is what we're supposed to have control over. Only so many times, when we say look inward, people are like, well, what am I looking at? Where am I looking? What's going on? So I love that about the system.
Right. Okay. Now I've got another question. But my other question I was thinking of, we have been taught and it's really interesting with spiritual people. There's also like this divide of, I am spiritual, yet I haven't quite opened up to the great awakening part. So there are all these tiers. So I really enjoy it when I connect to a spiritual person who knows everything that's going on. So one of the things that, as spiritual people that we've been taught is to connect up, connect to the stars. Like that's where you go initially. And I've learned over the past year, to be an embodied master, it's so important that we're human, that the earth, connecting to the earth, that should be kind of the first connection and then up to the heavens. Okay, what would you say to that, knowing that you talked about the earth being the source?
Yes, the earth is the source. It is also at our root level when we're in the source in our compilation of consciousness is structured just like the earth. It has an electromagnetic field. We're aligned to the true north of the earth, so we're all on the same map. And when that gravitational wave flows to the surface and suddenly here we are. And what happens is that wave continues on into the heavens, but it gets hooked up to the earth's electromagnetic field, which is running out of the South Pole and into the North Pole, and gets pulled back down into the center to begin again. And this string that's spinning, it's spinning at the speed of light squared. And this is what is giving us the ability to have the human experience is this string with this human intention. Now, you're talking about the stars. I think in my model, this is a reflection. The stars and the heavens are a reflection of the microcosm and the particles. And if you were to look into a microscope at all of the particles and see that this is really, they're really connected, and I don't think they can be separated.
I would agree with that. Okay, what do you think about meditation?
Oh, I can't live without it. How's
Me
that?
either. Yeah. Talk about that because my guest last week too, we talked about because I believe that is the source of everything. Is that the right way to say it, or the highest way to say it? That for me, without those times of quietness, that they allow me to connect to all that is. Okay, please tell me your perception of that.
Yes, I think there's two parts to it. I think there's the meditation that we're talking about, which I do on a regular basis. And in fact, I have on my YouTube channel, I just did a 8-part summer meditation series about
Neat.
realigning to the true north of Earth. We called it the remagnetization.
Oh, neat. Thank you.
So that's really important. I think the other part of it is, however, is that when we get out of meditation and we've quieted the fluctuations of our thinking, we've been letting our emotions flow and listening to our intuition and becoming unified, and we go out into the world, that's a spinning chaos that brings stuff at us at an enormous pace right now and unexpectedly, and triggers and all of that. I think the other side of meditation is, and I'm prejudiced, is what conflict revolution teaches us, which is it's like a walking meditation.
Mhm.
It's that we nurture this witness so that when we go out into the world, we're watching ourselves, and now we know what to watch. We have intellect, we have intuition, and we have emotion. And they're like different organs, right? If something's wrong with the heart, you don't treat it the same way if there's something wrong with the stomach. So you have to know, okay, you're triggered is usually the sign, right? Emotional trigger. And you have to know what you're going to do for the emotion and what you're going to do for the intellect. Because chances are when we get triggered emotionally, I'm angry, it triggers intellect, thought. I'm angry because la, 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 la. And so we teach people how to, first of all, detach those two things so that you deal with your emotion in a completely different way than we have been taught since time began, which is to analyze it and think about it and then decide it's like. No, emotion becomes a physical activity with our breath. And we're trying to keep it away from our thoughts unless we're feeling high level superconscious thoughts. I just did this in the bathtub this morning. I had this huge wave of sadness, and I started just feeling and breathing and crying, but
Yes.
thinking, I'm bringing peace. I'm bringing peace. I didn't think about all those triggering thoughts about those events that took place that I thought they were about. Moving it through. So I think meditation is so important to deal with intellectual imbalances, to quiet that mind down and but when we're out about in the world, we have to have something we can do on our feet.
I love nurture the witness. Tell me, Barbara, your articulations and how you put words together, so great.
Thank
So
you.
great. Like I'm just, yeah. So when I write our little description of the podcast, I'm going to use some of these as well. Okay, go back to how did you learn you were channeling Einstein? How did that come to be?
Well, I published a book in 1997 called Diaries of a Psychic Sorority, Talking with the Angels. And that's the whole story of how we got together and all the groups and all the transcripts. And I had already been doing conflict revolution in the workshop. And I got a call from a tabloid in London, a paranormal tabloid, who had seen my book and they wanted to know if I could do this interview with Princess Di from beyond the grave. And I'd never done such a thing. I'd learned I could speak to people who had passed on, but they came to me and sort of appeared, and then I got messages to their loved ones. So I did it. I channeled this interview, typing it, and printed it out and read it, and it was so deeply profound.
Wow.
And a lot of detail about her life and her kids and Dodie and everything that happened that night. But she was really talking about peace and world peace. And in real life, she was very much about world peace. So the tabloid didn't want it, but my agent and I made this list.
Because it was good, because it had substance.
I'm sure they wanted, they flew me to New York and spent 5 hours with me, plying me with champagne, asking me all these questions about Princess Anne. And I'm pretty sure they were looking for Camilla and Charles dirt.
Right. They wanted trash. And you gave them deep stuff. And they were like, no.
No, which is all divine, of course. But we made this list of people that maybe there's other famous dead people who want to talk. And Einstein wasn't on it, which I think was really interesting as I look back.
Who was on it? Do you remember?
Oh, gosh, yes. We had the ones that said no. We had Mother Teresa, Gandhi, Elvis, and the next one up was Nicole Brown Simpson.
Ooh, that's interesting.
That was really interesting. And then I think Johnny Versace, because he had just been murdered too. And it turns out, and I didn't know any of this, it turns out that Johnny Versace and Princess Di were really good friends with Elton John. Mm-hmm. And so when she died and then he died, Elton John was a mess. So the book is dedicated to him. But it was when we did John Kennedy, which in history, looking back on what he said back then, is since come to be known. Mm-hmm. But he said to us, put your list away. We will tell you who is coming.
Well, come on. And Spirit can be quite sassy. It sounds like it was like, put it away, Barbara. Come on. Just
exactly. I was like, great, because, you know, I go to Elvis and say, do you want it? He's like, no, I'm getting in too much trouble. And so they said Einstein. And I thought, oh, fun, you know, who doesn't love Einstein? But when I sat down to channel him, I'll never forget, I was in my agent's bathroom in Manhattan. It was this thunderstorm. And I spoke. I didn't write it, I spoke. Okay. And when I opened my mouth, this was the voice of all of my readings from the beginning.
Wow.
It was so profound. It took me several years to come to grips with that, because I'm not somebody who just runs, oh yeah, I'm doing this, I'm talking to angels, I'm channeling Einstein. It's like, what? I'm an antenna. I'm talking to angels. What? I'm talking to Einstein. But what he said in that interview was so profound to me. He said so many little things that just made my head spin, like ADHD is actually a disease of the parents. That, you know, in indigenous people, your children run free. Even today, I live in a very indigenous world, and you have a meeting and all the kids are just running crazy free. So put them in a chair for 8 hours. Yeah. To keep them. Yeah. And there was a lot of things. He talked about reincarnation in different ways, like you can reincarnate into the same life over and over and over again as well. And so after that, I published Party of 12, the Afterlife Interviews, in June of, I think, 2001. And I was still, when I was doing group readings or doing channeling, I was still angels, because that's what I was used to, and it sounded safe. And after 9/11, I thought, I have this is a book of people who had lived, who were peacemakers when they were alive, who died and then got together in a group and did this book they wanted the world to see. I think I should step out and tell the world, I'm actually channeling Einstein. I'm actually channeling these people. So that's when I sort of came out of the closet with that part of my career mission.
Okay, so how was that, hearing that, like like, who am I to do this? I'm not saying, oh, I'm doing this. Like, because there is a huge degree of humbleness in doing this work. When you first came out, were you like, oh, let's see how people are going to receive this? Am I like, how did it go?
It went well. It went really well. We had a
Wow.
room, probably about 35 people, and just asking really down to earth questions about, um, I think George Bush was president, and they were asking questions about Bush, and they were asking questions about, one of the interviewees was Anwar Sadat, who had been assassinated and had been a peacemaker. Uh, Him and Menachem Begum and so there were incredible questions, and I left that interview wondering, or that channeling session, like, what am I going to do with this? What am I going to do with this information? And it
Yeah.
turns out that in 2008, I decided, and this was after um, my Einstein book came out, and I was traveling the world teaching the unified field theory and channeling Einstein. And I wrote an autobiography called Party of 12 Post 9/11. And I put that interview, among other interviews, I interviewed Kurt Cobain and um, Cliff Baxter, who was the Enron executive
Oh,
who committed suicide.
yes.
And so I
She's
put
doing air
that,
quotes, by the way, for those of
yes,
you
you're
that
going to be
can't
doing,
see.
yes. So that's where that went. And, after I did Party of 12 and I did Einstein, I thought, I want to do a little book just for Einstein.
Hmm.
Who doesn't love Einstein? He's so great, and he's been my voice forever. So in 2005, I thought, well, let's do this. I had no idea, I had no expectation. And in that book, Imagining Einstein, Essays on M Theory, World Peace, and the Science of Compassion, he delivered his unified field theory and these maps and the scientific definition of compassion. And that too was something that it wasn't like, oh, look at me, I've got the answers. It was like, I have to go out in the world and tell people that the source is in the center of the earth and it operates like a black hole. Is that even impossible? Is this just ridiculous? And all these years later, no, you have Brian Greene, famous string theorist, talking about how black holes can be small, and he really believes that life originates out of one. And so it's been a long journey of, I think it's given me, well, maybe it's contributed to my own mental health challenges, because these are not things I did lightly. This isn't something that I like bragged about. I I had to go very slow, and now it's been over 30 years of doing this work, only to look back on all of that work and realize it was all exactly what they said it was.
Mm. Well, and it takes bravery to do this work, to step out and go, okay, I might seem like a loony person to other individuals, yet I've got to do this. I don't know about you, but it's like I am, like this podcast, gently pushed to do it and encouraged to do it, even though this isn't I guess my natural, but I love doing it. I have fun doing it. Yet it's like this voice inside of you that has to be heard, that has to be, even if only one person hears it or what, it just can't be stopped. Even if I try to stop, I just can't, because I also know that this is part of my work. This is part of who I'm supposed to be. This person who brings people together, who speaks about things. And obviously, you are that. Was the, I'm going to use the word scary. What was the scariest stepping out for you in terms of all of this that you've done? And I want to know exactly how many books you've written as well.
The scariest stepping out. Well, I've metaphysical books on these
Yeah.
topics. I've written 6,
Okay, that's amazing.
and I have other books, but I think, but just to preface the question,
Yeah.
I started writing music and doing music at such a young age, and I knew all I ever wanted to be was a rock star. And so when I got out of high school, there was no question I was not going to college. I was going on the road, and I went on the road for 20 years. And it was a passion, like you said, there's a passion that
Yeah.
impelled me to do that, not money. Money didn't do that. And so I sort of ingrained in my system this, you might call it counterculture, you might call it kind
Yeah.
of a somebody who steps outside of the norm, whatever. So that by the time I got channeling and then even doing the groups, that was all kind of safe, surrounded. There wasn't a lot of, well, back when I started channeling, it was just referral of friends. There wasn't any social media or anybody to really know that I did it. But I think the scariest part was when I started on Party of 12 and I was doing all these incredible interviews with Princess Diana and Sigmund Freud, stuff I'd
Oh,
never heard about. Jesus, this incredible interview. And then Hitler came up. And I wasn't particularly afraid, like, oh, he's going to somehow capture me and drag me to hell with him. It was then my psychic sorority sisters started to back away because
oh,
they
no
said,
way.
we didn't sign up to talk to Hitler. And I get that. It's like, I didn't sign up to talk to Hitler either, frankly,
Mhm.
but he's here in the queue. And now in 2024, it's really one of the most profound interviews I think I've ever done because he was warning us and he was talking about what hell really is. Hell isn't a place you go, hell is a condition that you take with you when you die and you have to deal with it like he was. But there was a huge stigma that made me, for a long time after that, when I would go to towns and somebody would host me and they'd book readings, that and I had this happen once in Charleston, South Carolina, where somebody came for a reading. In the middle of it, she just dropped down on her knees and started doing this sort of fundamental Christian praying over me because I was
Oh
evil. And
gosh.
so,
Oh my
so
gosh.
that was probably the scariest part because the rest of it, aside from the kind of mental health issues that have been my challenge to put conflict revolution to work, and they've worked very nicely, thank you. But I have been so counterculture and I've been so gone against the grain that that
Yep.
stuff really didn't bother me too much.
I completely understand that. And I want to move to the just be practice in a moment, yet I want to maybe end, unless there's something else you want to add onto this as well, in terms of Hitler. And I love the counterculture because I feel like I've always been kind of this black sheep, never quite fitting in, but I was supposed to. That's in it. It's great, especially now. I totally understand it. From my perception too of Hitler, and this is not diminishing everything that happened. Yet, I feel it was kind of necessary, just like this great awakening that's going on. And he was, okay, how do we even say this? Embodying, it wasn't just Hitler that came to rise in power, everyone around him helped that. So there was this consciousness of division that was necessary to create this. Again, not just him, a whole community, a whole, and now, okay, Barbara, you're going to have to help me with this. That going back and looking at that kind of being hell on earth, but also knowing in this great awakening that it wasn't just him. America helped with some of that. I mean, it is so polluted. And so when you get into it so deep, so juicy, so riveting, so mind blowing. All right, how would you tag on to that?
Well, first of all, what you said is exactly what he said. He said, I could not have done this alone. So understand that. And
Yes.
secondly, he was saying that there was this movement from Jesus of this huge spiritual love and compassion, that he was the other side of the
Side of that.
duality.
Yes.
And also that the final word was that all of us have the potential to be Jesus and Hitler and the
Yes.
whole gamut in between. And
Yep.
it's our conscious choices that will decide which way we go with that. And so in retrospect, now what we see happening today. And like you say, when you look back on World War II and you start to learn all of these things that actually took place that we didn't know, and how much the US was culpable for what happened with Hitler. And then we brought them all to the United States. We brought
Operation Paperclip. Yes, we did.
Operation Paperclip, and here we are now today with what I see as a continuation of that embedded in the government that we're in. It doesn't matter what side you're on, it's just the way the structure is. And how can we bring that down? How can we transform that if we don't know that it's happening? And how can we then, I don't want to say protect ourselves so much as evolve ourselves
Yes.
to be the people who confront that. And that's my World Peace Tour, is that I'm looking for the participation of the willing who want to take part in a worldwide nonviolent movement to end this age of war by going inward first in conflict revolution.
Yes.
And find this practice and this alignment to compassion so that we naturally begin to manifest the things around us that need to come to life. And I think that's what we're seeing, as dire as it is in some places. But people are more compassionate, I think, than they ever have been before on the planet. I really think that because of the horrors that are going on.
Mm. If I was going to drop my microphone, I would do it. So good. And I will say this one thing before we go into the practice, and I've mentioned this before, but to go along with what Barbara has said, that we can be this darkness, we can be the light. So one of my going into a parallel life, I was this ruler somewhere in Asia, and generations, my influence was generations of hurt for people. Like I killed people. I was male and took wives from their husbands, killed people, created wars. Like, in a sense, I was Hitler. So it was hard to feel that because I felt it. I remember just crying. It was just, yet it helped me to see very clearly, you are not separate from any of this evil that has been done, any of the darkness. You are that. And you are also the light. So in this life, essentially through this great awakening, you have a choice of what to be, and also not to be scared of the evil because you have done that. I mean, okay. All right, girl, let's go into the practice. All right. What do you feel you're going to do now based on what we've talked about?
Just be practice.
I would like to leave your listeners with the inspiration to consider conflict revolution.
Okay.
Very simple steps. Hard to do sometimes.
Yeah.
Very hard. The hardest work, the shadow work, the feel and breathing work. So what I tell people is, in a day, if you're going to practice conflict revolution, so you get up in the morning, of course, you say your prayer of gratitude. Thank you for another day of the most miraculous life I ever could have dreamt up. And set your intention that you are going to watch yourself throughout the course of a day. And what you're going to look for is, at any given moment, what you are feeling in your solar plexus, what your intuition might be impelling you to do, and what your intellect is doing. And then get out into your day. And eventually, you're going to get triggered. And the trigger, the angels told us, that's the sign that some great gift is about to come to you. And so when you get triggered, what's going to happen is it's going to instantly fly up through your intuition and right into your brain, and you're going to start thinking. So if you have set your intention in the morning that you're going to watch yourself, and you're going to observe yourself. You're not even going to do anything right now. You're just going to watch yourself. So watch. What are you feeling? Not why. What? Identifying the pure basic emotion. Is it anger? Is it sadness? Is it joy? Is it whatever it is? Simple. That's it. And if you're going to start to analyze why you have it, then you're not doing it right. You're in your head. So when we identify what that is, the idea is to address it with our breath. to the best of your ability. Now, sometimes when you get triggered and you're in a situation and stuff is flying, you can't just step aside and go, hold on, I'm going to do some deep breathing work. But you can step out, say, okay, yeah, Barbara said, okay, just start breathing, move it along, move it along. And as you do that, we're listening for what that intuitive impelling is. And sometimes that's hard because people don't think they're intuitive when in real, they have this spiritual organ of intuition in them as a functioning, and you can't live without it. So let's learn how to use it. And remember, it's always going to be a small, next, most advantageous step for the good of the whole. And when we say that, we're talking about your whole system. Not talking about figuring out what's good in the world, what's going to be best for your whole system. And it will tell you. Maybe you're like triggered by somebody and it's going to say, back away. Or maybe it's going to say, speak up. And then watch what your intellect does, because that's where all the trouble begins. It's like wild horses. And we're triggered by the thing and it's back from the past and then we're this and on, it's all like this, but in there is free will. So the rule of thumb that we have in conflict resolution is if you're really struggling with that obsessive intellect, like you're just focused on your mother-in-law because it's been 10 years that she's been this person. We all do it. It's how we operate. It's what the propaganda is, that somebody outside you is the source of your feelings. No. You don't give your feelings away. Mm-hmm. So what we do is we create sound bites, little statements, because the intellect will run wild with stories and it'll keep going and there'll be all this information. So wait a minute, let's clear it down, identify very clearly and succinctly what triggered you. My mother-in-law, this was an actual client I had. My mother-in-law wants me deported back to the Dominican Republic. That was her. And then what we're going to do is we're going to revolve that around to where, my mother-in-law doesn't respect me, whatever. Okay, I don't respect me. I don't respect someone else. Where am I perpetrating this big trigger that I think somebody else is doing to me? And this is not a 1 step, 2 step, 3 step done. This is an art.
It's a life.
It's a life and it's a lifestyle and it's a worldview. And I can't not live this way. I still project onto people, but not for very long, because I know I've got to, and it makes me madder. And then I have to feel and breathe more. And then intuition is going to say, keep going. And then I'm going to go, I don't want to keep going, but I'm gonna, because I know what the payoff is. And so in that case, in that situation, when she revolved it around, she got big tears in her eyes. And she said, you know where this was going, didn't you? And I said, well, I do, but not because I'm a psychic, but because it's a formula. What triggers us and other people is our lesson. And she said, I'm homesick.
Oh.
And I said, well, why don't you go home? Well, I've got these children and my husband. I said, I'm thinking she's got like a 6-month-old and a 3-year-old and her husband's at work. How old are your kids? 15 and 18. So now she's got to go into her intellect to find all the messages that are telling her, well, I can't go home. Intuition says, go home, go see your family. I can't go home. The children won't work without me. My husband won't be able to do it. We all do it. And so she was able to rearrange all that when she finally heard the impelling that I really want to go home. I'm being impelled to go home. And she went home, and now she goes home on a regular basis. And it's this joyful. And so that's how conflict resolution works. And it's not, like I said, it's not easy. But when you get that aha moment, when you see the thing that you are perpetrating, that you didn't think, your mind wasn't telling you it, because your mind is saying, well, I'm a really nice person, I would never do that. when you stop and witness yourself, you will find yourself doing things you never thought you were doing. And then what are you going to do about it? And when you get it and you turn it around and you stop disrespecting yourself, then things naturally change. The story I always like to tell just shortly is that when me and the psychic sorority, we had our first fight, and we got the transcript and said, we have to look within. If you're involved in a conflict, the root of your part of it is within you. And the three of us sitting at my dining room table, we all burst into tears like, oh my gosh, this is what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be figuring this out and testing it on our conflicts. And I was able to come back to the table and go, you know what? Here's what I can do. Here's what I need to do. And Kim came back, instead of going, Barb, you need to do this. She's like, here's what I can do. Well, I went to work that night. I was singing at a club, and there was a bartender who never had a dime a day for me, who couldn't get enough of me. So kind, offering me music, giving me tips. And I thought, this is what those darn angels are talking about. When we change it here, it just naturally has an impact. And I could never have pulled that waitress aside and said, hey, how come you don't like me? And gotten the same kind of response as I did then. So it's very magical. It's very sacred when we take this kind of responsibility. And I really think it is the answer to world peace, frankly.
Yep, I would completely agree to that. So Barbara, thank you so much. And to also add and sum this up, you are responsible for you. You are, because again, I have a lot of people that come to me that this person did this, and we're working to get out of victim mode, to take responsibility. We have complete responsibility for our own feelings. And that is really hard, yet it is so freeing once you discover that. And I will also put into that, because I really like the show also to be inspirational. As you do this work, your own power, just like you said, Barbara, the magic, the increase of your own vibration when you start to realize these things and act on these things. It's just incredible, because part of this great awakening is for people to really discover the gifts that they have within themselves. Because what we do is not extraordinary. Everyone has these capacities of great connection and great hearing and great sight, and we're all unique too. Oh, it's just wonderful. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. I'm all excited now.
Great ad. All right, girl. Called you girl a couple times. Thank you so much for bringing your wisdom and all your experience to the show. And it's really been neat to watch. Well, I did this, was exposed to this in the late 60s, and then I wrote this book. And then, I mean, definitely what a life that you have had and leading you to this moment. So thank you for everything that you do. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I love this conversation. Thank you.
Oh, good. All right, Wisconsin. All right, everybody. Next week, we just every week, as long as I feel like doing this, we are just going to work on ascending. We are going to work on stating the truth of things. It's just good. All right, y'all. See you next time. Thank you again, Barbara.
Thank you.
Okay, coming back for a second, because Barbara has made an offer to everyone listening. Barbara, can you tell what we just talked about?
Absolutely. If you go to barbarawith.com, BarbarawIth, and I have readings, I will gladly give you half off. Just sign up on the website, but make contact. Go to the contact page and just tell me you heard me on Eden, and I will give you 50% off of a reading.
Well, heck yeah. All right. So Eden, Just Be Spiritual Boom podcast, let her know that that's where you are coming from, and she will give you half off your reading. That's stellar. Okay. Thank you, Barbara. All right. Bye again. Y'all, find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Truth Social, as well as Rumble, BitChute, YouTube, plus a plethora of other audio directories like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So like, subscribe, do it all. See ya.